Number 2. The bar fight. I'm sure I can speak for most people. Working in the restaurant business comes with its ups and downs. On one side of the coin, it's a job. Add on top tips from generous patrons and you might walk away with quite a bit of money after your shift. But then you've got those certain customers. The ones where it seems no matter how much you do for them, they can't seem to appreciate you. I take you back with me to a time when I used to work for a Buffalo Wild Wings as a bartender. I'm male, by the way. Now, when it came to conversations with customers, it was usually just about what they were going to order. Occasionally, you'll have the chit-chatters who might ask about your day, but for the most part, you're serving drinks. Well, I remember it wasn't a Monday because there was football, and our Buffalo Wild Wings had been packed. I was busy serving customers when one in particular called me over with a very angry tone.
I've been waiting here for an hour. Not one of you has taken my order. Is that how you treat your customers?
Now, even though we were busy, one thing I'm good at is telling apart who has been waiting for too long and who hasn't. This guy had been here for no more than 5 minutes, and he was really being overdramatic. So I tell him I would get his drink right away, just to get him off of my case. He orders a Dos Equis, and then another waitress takes his order of buffalo wings. And that was it, at least for 10 minutes.
Hey bartender, get me another drink. Make it quick.
It's the same man yet again. I tell him to give me a minute and he snaps back at me, pretty much calling me all the names in the book. A couple of other patrons try to get him to settle down, explaining how busy we were, and he seems to chill. Fast forward, I want to say 15 or 20 minutes later, and I'm just returning from a break.
Where were you? I've been looking all over for you. None of your other bartenders or waiters are serving me like the king I am. You should be grateful. We essentially pay your bills. The customer's always right.
This guy was definitely taking the title of worst customer ever. Oh, and by the way, the customer isn't always right. That's a false statement given by restaurants in order for us to truly value the customer. And don't get me wrong, we do value the customers, but only the nice and respectful ones. Anyways, I grab him 2 Dos Equis so that he would stop complaining, and I get back to work. At this point in my story, the man has had 4 Dos Equis, and he's starting to get intoxicated. This was also the point I noticed he started an argument with the waitress who brought his food, asking why his wings were cold and how he had been waiting for hours. Realistically, it was maybe 30 minutes of waiting. I do remember the waitress that served him was fairly new, so she actually started to cry, and I felt bad for her. This was the point I get involved and I took over for her, even though I should have gotten a manager.
What are you going to do about it, tough guy? You can't touch me. Come on, fight me, I dare you.
The man is continuously pushing me and trying to get a reaction. How I remember trying so hard to keep my cool. Meanwhile, some other customers are asking him to chill. Suddenly, he snaps. He grabs one of the Dos Equis bottles he had been drinking, and then he smashes it against the bar table. Using the pointy end of the bottle, he takes a swing at me. By this point, I already had my arms up to cover my face from the blow, but he still manages to scratch me up pretty good, leaving some nasty scars. That was enough for 2 other patrons to get involved. One of them smacks the bottle out of the man's hand, and the other puts the man into a chokehold. I sorta just stood there in shock holding my arm, which was beginning to sting. A bunch of other patrons then come to our rescue, getting a security guard involved in the process. The man is escorted out of the Buffalo Wild Wings, and police arrived where they questioned and then arrested him. When officers asked if I wanted to press charges, I gladly said yes, and he was charged at a later date. As for my arm, it did require some stitches, but I made a full recovery, returning to work not too long after the crazy event. Before we continue, I want to take this opportunity to thank my channel members: Robbie, Bo, Kim, Spunky the Nutcase, Ingrid, Evil's Girl, Corey, Zombie Mama, Haiti, Benjamin, Tabitha, Scott, and our newest member, Sean. Glad to have you all. Now, if you'd like to help support what I do here on the channel while getting early access to new uploads and video shoutouts, then make sure to check out the channel memberships. You can find it next to where it says subscribe, or you can head directly to my channel and find it there. As these are unpredictable times with me being furloughed from my work, any support is greatly appreciated. Thanks. Now let's continue. Number 3. Anger at the drive-thru. I work late nights as a nurse for a local hospital, and I just gotten out of my shift at around 10 p.m. I was starving, and I contemplated making food at home, but then I thought it would be quicker to go to a restaurant and get something there. I opted to go to this very popular Mexican restaurant to pick up some tacos de lengua, my personal favorite. When I pull up into the drive-thru, I only see 2 other vehicles, which was a very rare sight at this place, as it's always popping in the evenings. Either way, I go ahead and pull up to the menu, and I start looking over my options.
Hola, buenas noches. ¿Con qué le puedo ayudar?
The man on the other end asks in his scripted spiel. I give him my order, and then I wait for the person in front of me to pull away, so I can get my food. Here's the thing. Though I did mention the drive-thru being empty, the restaurant itself was packed. That's what was causing the delay. Yeah, no kidding. A very rare sight indeed. Well, I waited there almost 10 minutes. Meanwhile, another vehicle that was behind me started to honk.
What's taking so long? I've got things to do, you know.
I hear the voice of the man shout behind me. I don't say anything, but I give him that "dude, I'm in the same boat as you" kind of look, hoping it would knock it off. The man is still honking after a solid 30 seconds, and I'm starting to get a bit annoyed. This was when I made a bad decision. With my short temper, I give him the bird, and this makes things even worse. In a matter of seconds, I see the man in the truck behind me step out of the driver's seat. Except now, not only does he have an angrier look, but he's got a crowbar. I watch the man with shock across my face as he begins scratching the back bumper, and then he smashes out the back window. I'm obviously freaking out because there is a little wall blocking my exit to the right, and the vehicle in front of me isn't moving. I couldn't really blame the car ahead of me, because it was an elderly woman, and there was no way she was going to fight this dude with the crowbar. Anyways, holding a tight grasp on my pepper spray, he then moves to the passenger seat, and he smashes the window as well. But just when I think he's about to come after me, a miracle happens. I see a police cruiser pull up into the parking lot, and its sirens turn on. This guy immediately drops the crowbar, and he books it across the parking lot. One of the officers starts chasing the man. Meanwhile, the other comes to check up on me and the elderly woman who had just stepped out of her vehicle. Needless to say, I watched the officer chasing the man tackle him to the ground and put him into handcuffs. I ended up finding out that the man had been drinking prior to the incident, and he was already impaired, not that it wasn't obvious. Anyways, I had to take the bus to work the next week, as my vehicle got repairs. But luckily, I didn't have to pay for any of the damages. Number 4. He didn't take no lightly. To preface this story, I'm female, and I was 19 years old when this took place. It was a few years ago when I had just gotten out of work at Best Buy on a Friday evening, and I decided to do something a little bit different. Normally, my parents will buy myself and my sister dinner from one of our favorite Chinese restaurants, but I ended up texting my parents telling them I would get the food for the whole family. My mom was ecstatic, and she then texted me everyone's entrees. The drive to the Chinese restaurant took no less than 10 minutes, where there was a huge line. Not that I wasn't surprised considering it was Friday evening and the place was popular. While I'm waiting in line talking to some of my friends on Messenger, the man in front of me touches my hand as if he's trying to get my attention.
Hey, did I know you from somewhere? Yeah, I know. You're the girl that works at Best Buy, aren't you?
I wasn't wearing my name tag, but due to the blue dress shirt and khaki jeans, it doesn't really take a genius to put 2 and 2 together. Yeah, I work there. Sorry, but I don't really remember you. We get so many customers, it's hard to tell who's who.
That's fine. I just never got the chance to tell you, but you're really hot. Could I maybe get your number and we can hang out sometime?
Some other people in the line started chuckling. Meanwhile, I'm standing there embarrassed. Just so you get a better understanding, this man was, I want to estimate, mid-50s, and he could have easily been mistaken for my father. Sorry, but I'm not really interested in dating at the moment. I'm way too busy with school and work. I should have just told him I had a boyfriend so he would have left me alone, but I didn't think about it. Instead, I focused my attention back to my phone.
Hey, don't ignore me. I was talking to you.
He snaps back, to which the dad in front of me gets involved and tells the man to relax. They get into an argument as the kids start crying, and I go ahead and tell them everything will be alright. Eventually, things settle down and the man pays for his food, and he leaves. But that's not before he whispers something into my ear.
I'm not finished with you.
That was really creepy. I try to put it behind me. Instead, I focus my attention on making the order and getting back home to relax after a long and tiring day. Hey, would you like us to walk you back to your car? The man who had the two kids asks me. I tell him I would be okay, and he eventually leaves wishing me a good evening. Looking back, I wish I would have taken his offer. Anyways, I exit the Chinese restaurant and I begin making my way to my vehicle. But that's when clumsy me grabs the keys from my pocket and drops them, where they fall underneath my Volkswagen Beetle, as if the night wasn't already starting off horribly. I speak too soon because as I get up from grabbing my keys, guess who's walking over to me? Yep, it's creepy dude from the restaurant.
You made a fool out of me in there, and I don't appreciate that.
He violently shouts, which is then followed by a bunch of vulgarities. I quickly jump into my Volkswagen, giving him the cold shoulder, but he still decides he isn't finished. He moves to the front of my vehicle, and he takes out a utility knife, and then he begins blocking my exit while continuously shouting at me. Now, I'm sorry, but to the dude's foot, you deserved it. I managed to maneuver my vehicle around him, but like I said, not without smashing his foot, which I could see him reach for while cursing at me. As I wasn't looking to get into trouble, however, I run back into the restaurant and I manage to get everybody's attention. Thank goodness a bunch of the patrons backed me up when the police arrived, and I was able to get my name cleared. I never did hear a call back from police, so it's safe to say that man might be behind bars. Number 5. Robbed at Wendy's. Back in the late 1980s, I used to work for a Wendy's fast food restaurant as a way of making extra cash. By the way, this took place in a not-so-safe area. Anyways, I worked there for a couple of years and had my fair share of creepy moments, but nothing would come as close as to this chilling evening. It was an hour before closing, and it was just myself and another coworker named Tiffany. The Wendy's was empty, and we spent those last 30 minutes singing along with the music over the radio and seeing who could be the fastest to make the other laugh. Eventually, I ended up losing, which saw me having to take out the trash. I always despised being the one to do that because the back alleyway where the dumpster was located was always creepy. I remember we would always complain to the manager that we needed more light because it honestly felt like somebody was watching you. Anyways, I'm in the back alleyway when all of a sudden, I hear a loud pop coming from inside the Wendy's. It sounded like a gunshot, which immediately raised alarms in my head. What was happening? And was Tiffany okay? Without even thinking, I run back into the Wendy's, where there were two masked men with guns and large bags. Seeing me, both of them then point their pistols in my direction, and they tell me not to move nor make any sort of sudden noises.
You two do exactly as we say. We want you to dump all the money in the register and put them into these bags, and make it quick.
We had no other choice. I make my way over to the cash register while we began to put money in the bag. Poor Tiffany. I remember her crying and struggling just to grab the cash, which only angered these robbers even more.
Hurry it up, girl. Otherwise your friend here is dead.
Look, I'll go ahead and take over for her. Please, just leave her out of this. I then remember one of them walking up to me, and then he aggressively says,
If either of you speak again, I'm dropping you and your little girlfriend.
That was enough to not only give me a bunch of nightmares, but it acted as an adrenaline rush to successfully hand over the money. Then just as quickly as this all started, it ended. The two men exit the Wendy's, and then they jump into a nearby waiting white van. Tiffany and I stood there in shock until I finally snapped out of it and called the police. They arrived in about 10 minutes, and we gave them our statement. Nothing was heard until about a month later, when two men were arrested. They were connected with the robbery that took place at our Wendy's that dark and chilling evening those many years ago. So even though we were happy they had been caught, it didn't come without the price of being affected by something so scary and life-changing. I'm not sure whatever happened to Tiffany, as like I said, this was in the 80s. All I can hope for is that she's living a happy life. By the way, Tiffany, if somehow, some way you're listening, and you remember that nerdy coworker who was always talking about cartoons and video games, I'm wishing you all the best. Before we get to the final story, I just wanted to go ahead and give you all a quick reminder. If you're ever looking for extra content, whether it be art, previews, or sneak peeks, then make sure to follow me over on my Instagram, @thecreepyfoxofficial. Thank you, I'll see you there. But for now, let's get on to our final entry. Number 6. Can I get you something? It seems I can never catch a break when it comes to encountering scary people. Honestly, I thought that by going on vacation with my best friend Julia in early 2013, we would have had the time of our lives. Though we kind of did. One night in question almost saw Julia and I miss our flight back home. Here's what ended up happening. We ended up vacationing in a popular resort town in Mexico as a way of celebrating our graduation from university. This would put us at both 24 years of age. Julia and I mostly stayed at the hotel, taking advantage of the spas, the swimming pools, the tanning on the beach, and enjoying the drinks that were on tap. Occasionally, we did take a couple of tours during our 2-week stay, but one night in particular saw us going to a very popular bar/restaurant. It was just across the street from our hotel and was themed around caballeros, cowboys, if you don't speak Spanish. Anyways, Julia and I head over there at around 9 p.m. and we get in line to enter the restaurant, as it was really packed. Finally, 20 or so minutes later, we find a seat at the bar. We both ended up ordering some strawberry margaritas and some chips with guacamole. As we sat there watching people dance and listening to the music, we eventually joined in on the fun, dancing for what seemed like an eternity, while making complete fools of ourselves. I mean, hey, it's vacation, so it is nice to get out of your comfort zone every now and then. During one of the more fast-paced songs, I ended up bumping into someone, causing their drink to spill. Honestly, I expected to be yelled at for my clumsiness, but instead the man, who was dressed sharply in a dark suit, offers his apology, and then he asks me in broken English if I wanted to get a drink with him. Mind you, by this point, Julia was separated from me due to the large crowd of dancers. I tell him I already had enough drinks, but he kept on insisting, saying it was his treat.
Come on now, don't be so shy. It's a tradition here in Mexico to buy drinks for others. You don't have to worry.
Yes, the man was handsome and he looked nice, but again, I didn't want to trust a stranger. That's why I start to walk away from him, trying to locate Julia. But he ends up walking in front of me and saying something along the lines of,
Look, I apologize if I came off too strong. I'm the owner of this place, and it's sort of my thing to treat people who aren't from around here.
Alarm bells were starting to ring in my head, but I couldn't explain why. After all, he hasn't given me any sort of reason to doubt him. The only sort of concern I have is that I was in a part of the world where I spoke just enough of the language to make out just a few certain phrases and words. Julia was my translator, and without her, I had this pretty bad confidence issue. Well, I decided to trust the man, and I follow him over to the bar. This was where I meet up with Julia, who asked me if I was ready to go back to the hotel. The man interrupts our conversation, and then he says he'd like to buy us both drinks. Julia then catches up on something that I was unaware of. While I was talking to Julia, the man spoke a couple of phrases to some other men who were dressed just as fancy as Mr. Dancer. I'm going to go ahead and call him that, just to make things easier. Anyways, Julia suddenly says with a concerned tone, "Okay, girl, I think that's enough for tonight. Let's get going." She grabs a hold of my hand, and we start to briskly make our way out of the restaurant. "Slow down, Julia. What's going on? Don't tell me you didn't understand what the man told the others." "No? What did he say?" At this point, we're just a 30 or so second walk from the traffic light. He told them we were a great catch, and that whatever they did, they weren't allowed to lose sight of us, or they would be in a lot of trouble. Your guess is as good as mine to what that meant. But things weren't over just yet. Out of nowhere, we begin to hear running footsteps approaching us, and we see it's Mr. Dancer and 5 other men.
Hold on. You dropped your wallet, miss.
We almost fell for it, but I remembered the only thing on my person were pesos and my passport. This was obvious, which was why we booked it to the hotel, half expecting them to follow us in there. Instead, we can see them begin to make their way into a van, where we soon lose sight of them. One of the hotel staff notices that we were out of breath, and then he asks us if everything was all right. We give him a rundown of what had occurred, and suddenly he grows cold and calls over a manager. We were pretty confused, until the manager explained this wouldn't be the first time this has happened. Apparently, it's a pretty common theme for people involved with crime to try and lure and trick foreigners into thinking they can be trusted. Usually, this involves hanging out at bars or parties, where they will try and act nice and try to buy you drinks, or try to get you to follow them to an isolated area. That's where they have fellow partners who are waiting to get you. Julia and I were very creeped out, and we couldn't believe things like this actually happened. Needless to say, we never left the hotel until it was time to head back to the airport. We have never traveled abroad since.